Hope everyone's having a pleasant afternoon. Well, we've got some more information to pass along about the 2023 Super Duty. We've seen a total of 3 of them now in less than a week. And everything from an F350 dually to a F250 or maybe F350 single rear wheel long bed. Both of those I think were 4-wheel drive. We've also seen an extended cab, not a crew cab, that was almost definitely an F250. We've seen the front, back, sides, and 2 of the grills that we saw were just the LED C-clamp lights with a bunch of black plastic making up the rest of the grill. So basically the XL grill, fully blacked out. And then one of them we saw that had a lot more chrome in it. And I hate to say it, but that new grill, it just feels like a miss. It's not as crisp and clean and classy looking, not even close, compared to the 17 to 22. It just looks like they tried too hard and made it kind of, smoothed over. I said earlier, it looked like what you'd get if the F-150 and the Super Duty had a baby. It's kind of like the old Super Duty, the 17 to 22, but a little more rounded, and it doesn't have that squared up, clean, aggressive look. It looks a little more, metrosexual. Not sure how else to say it. It's just like what happened to the Ram between the 4th and 5th gen. It just got a little bit too overwrought, and like they ran out of ideas and had to do something, so they did what they did. Nothing they could possibly do would be as ugly as the 2020 and newer Silverado, because that sets an all-time record for ugliness. But again, it just feels like a miss. It feels like they tried and failed to do something original with the new grill, again, on the 2023. A couple other details to pass along. It does not appear as if there's going to be a hybrid, at least from the folks we've talked to. Either diesel or gas, and obviously not a fully electric model, at least not yet, unless they're keeping it under really, really good security. But what it does appear is that they're going to have a sort of half and half version of Pro Power on board. It's a separate alternator. There's one alternator to generate 12 volt DC power to run the engine and the accessories, and then another alternator to generate 24 volts of DC. And that goes to a set of 2 batteries that are in series. 2 automotive 12 volt batteries, conventional batteries. And then the Pro Power on board runs an inverter off of that system, off of that circuit. So not off of the regular 12 volt automotive circuit that runs the rest of the vehicle, but off of a completely separate 24 volt DC circuit. Similar to what you have in military vehicles, like a Humvee. The Humvee has, it's got 2 automotive batteries in series. So a 24 volt electrical system, just like most military vehicles. They don't use 12 volts, they use a 24 volt electrical system, just because it can do a little more for you in terms of powering winches and things like that. And so, it sure seems like a lot of complexity just to run I think the number I heard was 2 kilowatts, a 2 kilowatt Pro Power on board system. I mean, you've got that same level of output in the regular F-150 EcoBoost and the 5 liter. The one that came out in 2021. So, you know, and what the gentleman said was, oh well, they didn't think there was enough demand for something higher output, like what's in the F-150 Power Boost, like a full 7.2 kilowatt inverter generator output. And that to me seems preposterous, because, you know, people buy a Super Duty to pull a big trailer, like a 35-foot camper, like a 48-foot gooseneck, such as the one we have. And, you know, for some people live out of their campers year-round. And some of these hotshot truckers, they live out of their vehicles year-round. And so you'd think a hybrid, or at least a high-output DC to AC inverter generator system would just be a slam dunk. Would be an open and shut case in terms of making the business case for putting it into production. But what's there to say? Who are we to question Ford, which has some of the best marketing people on the planet, on the level of Apple, and they know their customers, so they claim, at least the folks we've talked to, that there is not enough demand for a high output Pro Power onboard system, either 7.2 kilowatts or 2.4 kilowatts, like what the F-150 has. So again, unless the folks we've talked to are completely off base, no hybrid diesel, no hybrid gas engine, and the AC power system, or the Pro Power onboard system, is going to be run by a completely separate alternator that feeds a 24 volt DC system or circuit behind the back seats, 2 automotive batteries, and the inverter runs off of those 2 batteries to generate about 2 kilowatts of AC power to the bed, and probably also to the cab. A couple other things. No word on whether there will be any type of self-driving system, lane keeping, lane centering, adaptive cruise, stop and go, any of that. You know, we got a little bit of that into that discussion and didn't really nail that down, obviously. You know, people are talking on strict background. No word as to whether we're going to get the 12-inch screen like you already have in the F-150 with Sync 4, and like you can also get in the existing Super Duty with Sync 4, or if it's going to have that vertically oriented one that you see in the Expedition that just looks kind of weird. In the Expedition, and also the Mustang Mach-E. And not a lot of people like that. This one here seems perfectly fine. It'll be even better if they let you use the entire screen, the full 12-inch screen, for your CarPlay, instead of just this little tiny little box, this little maybe 6 or 8 inch box in the middle. But that's neither here nor there. Every interior we've seen, and a lot of them keep the interiors completely covered up, but obviously you can see the steering wheel and things like that. It's a dead ringer for the F-150. And as we've said before, you can think of the new Super Duty as essentially a new grille, and then the same truck, but with the F-150's cab plopped down onto it, and with that new, the step built into the sides of the bed. If you look at either of the 2 previous videos that we've published on the subject, it's very heavily camouflaged, but there's a big bulge in front of the rear wheel. And clearly what that is a bedside step, similar to what the Silverado has. And we've seen that in both prototypes that we've observed that had a full bed. We saw one with a contractor bed, but the ones that had a bed had the bedside step. We called it a tailgate step previously, and that's obviously not correct. So that's a nice improvement if you're middle-aged and you need to get in and out of the bed from the side, you know, to mess with your gooseneck or whatever else. A couple other things. We've seen the rear window, the rear glass in the back of the cab. It comes way down. It comes at least a couple inches further down in the new Super Duty prototypes that we've seen compared to the F-150. And you look at it and you wonder what that's about. But then what you realize is that the top of the bed, like the rails at the top of the bed, look like they're a good 2 or 3 inches lower in the new Super Duty compared to the F-150. And the only reason I can think that that's the case is because they want to make sure they have more than adequate clearance, so that when you've got a gooseneck trailer or a fifth wheel camper or what have you, you're not going to have it contact the sides of the bed. So the sides of the bed need to be lowered in order to give as much clearance as possible for your, again, you know, your camper or your car hauler or whatever gooseneck trailer you got hitched up to it, so you don't accidentally smack into the bed with the front portion of the trailer. What else? There's been a couple questions about the suspension and really no answers. You know, unless you get underneath and crawl around and look and see what's going on under the vehicle, all we've seen is what you'd expect to see when you're looking at a heavy-duty pickup with a solid axle front end and a solid axle rear end. The ones we've seen, I think 2 of them were 2-wheel drive and 1 of them was 4-wheel drive. And and Ford has had solid axles in the 4-wheel drive since they started making the Super Duty in '97, and I think also in the 2-wheel drive. They might have had that twin I-beam early on, but I think, you know, for at least the last 10-15 years, the 2-wheel drive Super Duty has been a solid axle as well. If you want an independent front end, a fully independent front suspension with actual control arms and half shafts, you're going to have to get a Chevy or a GMC, and that's too bad. And it's too bad because the steering is just better in an independent front end. And it's nowhere near as accurate. Doesn't give you any feedback. It's just not tight in a solid axle truck. But we know Ford has their reasons for doing what they're doing. What else? I really think that's about it. It does sound like Ford is having a hell of a time getting all the chips they need, the semiconductors, for all the systems they need to install in these new trucks. It's possible. It's not likely, but it's possible that maybe they just couldn't get enough chips, and that's why they don't have, maybe they weren't able to release the hybrid any quicker. And maybe they wanted to do a hybrid off the 7.3 liter gas engine, and they just couldn't get enough chips to make the system work. And maybe that's also why they don't have a high output Pro Power onboard system, you know, with 2.4 kilowatts or 7.2 or 9.6 or what have you, because they just didn't have enough chips. It's possible, but that's pure speculation. Again, what we heard from the conversations we've had is that it's going to be a 24 volt DC to 120 volt AC inverter generator run on a completely separate circuit than the rest of the vehicle's power. And we'll see if it plays out that way. Okay, I think that's all for now. And you know, for some people, the biggest news is that front grille. And like I said, seen it 3 times now in the flesh. It doesn't get better the more times you look at it. It's just sad to say it, but at least to this observer, it doesn't do it. All right, I think that's all for now. Thanks, everyone. Talk to you later.